TJ and Matt. Thank you so much for, your time today. I know you're both extremely busy executives in your companies, Vector Robotics and SVT Robotics. I guess I briefly introduce you both. Matt, you're the Director of Business Development at Vector Robotics, and TJ, the VP of Sales and Customer Success and all things related to customers. Perhaps you could both start off by introducing yourselves, giving us all a bit of more context as to who you are, why you chose your companies, and essentially what is fascinating about the robotics space for you both.
Said Matt Taruka. I'm a Director of Business Development at Vector Robotics, so I'm responsible for building out our partner ecosystem and for managing some of our enterprise accounts. It's been quite a journey.
Thank you so much, Matt. And TJ, would you give us a bit more color on yourself?
Yeah, so thanks for having us, T. As you mentioned, with SVT Robotics, responsible for our growth and partner channel success as well as end users.
Brilliant. Well, I guess to open up the discussion, I mean, today we're talking about, global pandemic, COVID, and now every executive is suddenly rushing to build this resilient supply chain. So, Matt, you knew I'd be looking at you. So, can you tell us a little bit about what does Vector Robotics do, just to set the scene for anyone who might be listening or watching, and then talk a little bit about how do you, as Vector Robotics, help to build this resilient supply chain?
Sure. So at a very high level, Vector Robotics is probably most famous for being a high capacity autonomous mobile robot company. Automated forklifts and vehicles along those lines have existed since the 1950s, but to date they've been these very pre-programmed robots that required a lot of infrastructure changes and were mostly used in manufacturing plants where you could really control them a lot better as opposed to in the warehousing space. Vector Robotics, our technology is unique in that we have these self-driving forklifts, but they have the ability to adapt their path as they're navigating throughout the facility. And so by not being limited to these fixed routes, it makes them much more flexible in how you can utilize them in a facility, and it makes them operate on much higher uptime than a traditional automated vehicle would within these complex environments. And then outside of the robots themselves, we've also developed an AI-based fleet optimization software. And so that software is constantly evaluating everything going on in the operation, and it is able to make adjustments on the fly. So whether that's, detecting that there's going to be a bottleneck in a certain area of the facility and finding a way to mitigate that, or if it is just seeing that we need to dispatch additional units because there's a spike in throughput and the current fleet can't handle that. All of that is done autonomously. And so the combination of those two technologies creates a much more flexible automation solution for our customers. But it still utilizes, existing form factors. They're still used to forklifts and everything, but now you can take the driver off of those, and it just allows them to operate in a much more natural way, I would say. With regards to how that applies to a resilient supply chain, people started looking into these technologies post the Kiva acquisition from Amazon. And we've seen the AMR space and other automation technologies along those lines start to grow and grow. And COVID really just kind of accelerated a lot of those trends that were already happening. You were hearing a lot of talks pre-COVID about the amount of reshoring that was coming in, about people, building out new supply chain networks. And this just really kind of forced the issue of you're dealing in a world where you have to carry a broader range of product than you ever did. The pace of technology is advancing so quickly that you need to constantly be retooling your manufacturing plants. At a pre-COVID, that might have just been there's new product cycles coming out, but then you were hearing stories about automotive plants spitting out ventilators, right? And then in the e-com space specifically, you know, even before COVID, we were hearing from a lot of our customers that like their 2019 volumes had exceeded their 2023 projections, and then e-com has blown up 5x since then. So all of this has just taken something that should have taken 5 or 10 years to get there and just squished it down into something that needs to happen today.
You know, what does this look like? Can you just give me an example of one of your customers right now? What are the challenges they're facing? How do they turn to you rather than someone else? And how was your Vector implemented?
So one of our public customers, they have had a growing increase in what they call non-conveyables. So people who were shipping like kayaks and furniture and things like that through e-com, things that never went through these buildings. We provide AMR solutions that are able to tow, you know, dozens of these non-conveyables all at a time and sort them throughout these e-com facilities, rather than needing to build out a network of conveyor belts to do this. And this just provides a faster way to get automation within a space. You know, the way to deploy a Vecna system is we come in, we drive a robot around. The robot kind of records a map of the facility in its head, and then from there it's allowed to go basically wherever you tell it to go. And it knows, you know, it's almost like Waze. It knows the 5 different ways it can get from point A to point B, and it's always gonna, you know, on the fly pick the best way to go about doing that business.
Okay, SVT Robotics. I mean, what is SVT Robotics doing? Can you tell us a little bit about the software platform? Why is everyone turning to you at the moment?
Certainly. So, I mean, let's start off with amazing technology from Vector Robotics, right? I mean, if we summarize it, today when you need to add more fork truck operators to your facility, you go to HR, you figure out how to staff, what type of job function do you want, you interview, your leadership team is tied up interviewing, staffing, training, 6-8 weeks if you're lucky to bring on a person to make them ready to roll. Technology providers like Vector Robotics can actually reduce the amount of time that it takes to put a fork truck fully autonomous in your facility and running exactly what you would want these humans to do, but multiple shifts, not taking breaks, not installing reflectors on hard infrastructure, etc., really enabling you to rapidly adapt to automation. So the AI tool that Matt mentioned is called Pivotal, can of course take measurements and data from the vehicles that it is connected to. And that data is things like, where am I at currently in the facility? Do I see blocking from my sensors? Things that a human would typically see, but I'm actually getting that captured back in data for AI to take decisions off of. And where the SoftBot platform comes into play is we actually can now connect that Pivotal solution to multiple WMSs, and it's in a drag and drop environment. So if you wanted to deploy into a building that's running a Blue Yonder instance, you're no longer sitting down with a host integration workshop to define what my message structures need to look like, to be able to understand the orders and the tasks and the triggers that create these assignments. And instead, we can actually go ahead and implement that in this no-code environment just through drag and drop connectivity on our SoftBot platform. And when you think about this holistically, this is what's really exciting for us in the industry, is as a user now, most of these companies are multiple facilities, they have a large network, and they may want to bounce equipment around where peaks happen towards your resilient supply chain question. But in some cases, they even have different WMSs. They have different configurations required. And historically, this has been a major challenge. When I've moved the automation to a new facility, it took another 6, 8, 10 plus weeks to go ahead and redeploy a fully integrated solution. And we're now able to do that in real time and actually move that inventory or move the automation to a new facility and immediately start that operations through the SoftBot platform. And when I think about resiliency, this is truly the unlock. You now have great technology providers like Vector Robotics who can actually take standardized job functions that you're hiring for, and I can now put automation in place faster than hiring people. Then secondly, now all of a sudden I can optimize the behaviors of this automation through the SoftBot platform, connecting additional inputs, whether or not that's from a WMS and or other equipment. And so what this really allows you with our SoftBot platform is to go ahead and deploy a Vecna. Hey, I know I have this many people today running pallets from the dock into a put away location or to a manufacturing line. I'll deploy Vecna today, and then 6 months from now, deploy a new solution. 6 months from that, continue to optimize the entire network with ultimate flexibility to take some of those Vecna vehicles and redeploy them into another facility, or add vehicles, which is also really fast with the Vecna solution. And so this is really the power of the SoftBot platform combined with great partners like Vector Robotics.
So can you tell us a little bit about your connection with the Quick Start program? How does the SoftBot platform, how does it connect with the Quick Start program exactly?
Yeah, so when you think about the Quick Start program, I'll let Matt talk towards the hardware, but you'll quickly realize that the old world design process of putting an AGV or an AMR into a facility is no longer reality. Historically, lead times on hardware were 20 plus weeks, right? And then you would get the hardware and somebody would have to install reflectors or tape or cut wire guidance tracks into your floor and get commitments from all the operators that the building's never going to change. My rack's going to remain the same, and that's where I should install reflectors. And I can almost hear the laughter of listeners that are operators that say, yeah, it will change as soon as I install this, because that's what happens. And so now Vecna, of course, has built flexibility into this Quick Start. We're talking weeks at most to deploy, get hardware on site, train the hardware, and actually receive tasks to go drive from Pivotal. And so where the SoftBot platform comes into play there is for all of these directed tasks, the order assignments, things of this nature from the WMS or a WES, all of a sudden we can enable that to be on this very shortened hardware and commissioning lead time as well, really enabling a fully integrated solution in just a couple of weeks from purchase order. And then further to Matt's point, if we're looking at a non-capital extensive play, combined with a RAS or an operational expense. And of course, you can deploy Vecna now in this OpEx model, and you license our connectivity into the SoftBot platform, so you're not having to build a massive integration, which may cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Matt, maybe you want to talk about the Quick Start program from a hardware standpoint?
Yeah, exactly. So we're much more similar to the Google car or the Waymo approach than a traditional automated vehicle. And we even use similar sensors. So the robots have 3D LiDARs on them. They create a full map of the facility, just the same as, you know, a person would if they have an idea of, okay, I need to get to aisle 17, which is, you know, 100 feet that way and take a left. And so the actual deployment process is very rapid. Once that infrastructure exists, everything's configurable via software. And so, as TJ was saying, getting the robots up and running is very quick. And then the issue to date has been typically a WMS integration. You're looking at, you know, their IT team getting in touch with our engineers, like a 3-month process. You know, tens of thousands, sometimes over $100,000 of costs sunk in from both sides when all is said and done, and this just slows down the process. And then, like TJ said, you go to a new facility, they've got a different version or a different WMS or something else has changed, and now we have to do a custom configuration again. And so this does open up a lot more possibilities what you can do with the robots in here. And with the Quick Start specifically, I was mentioning, like, you know, we've taken these package bundles and everything, and then long term, I think what we're looking at is, you know, you could get to the point where these much more complex workflows are even part of that, where you have robots that you treat as a, you know, almost, like I said, a monthly labor cost, essentially. You can get the hardware up and running as fast as possible. And then you've got a software platform that, rather than me having to do a custom integration with the WMS and also a third-party piece of equipment, I've got a forklift taking a pallet over to a palletizing station and then driving on the other end to pick up completed pallets and having to write all the custom code to make those handshakes happen. Now I can just the customer has the ability to draw those workflows out, and it's easier on Vecna side, it's easier on their side. You can get all these things up and running as fast as possible. And so we think the combination of those two things is very exciting.
So Matt, from storytelling perspective for your customers out there, where can you see this being actually implemented with if you give a figurative example of connecting both the software platform and the Quick Start program, how would, as a customer, how would I see this working?
Sure. So we are in the middle of a pandemic. Knock on wood, some vaccines are going to be coming out pretty soon. Once those vaccines come out, we are going to be spitting them out as fast as possible, and the distribution channels that are responsible for getting that out to the public, you're probably going to see customers taking on maybe some temporary warehousing or some overflow warehousing. So I've got a brand new building, blank slate. I need to move a ton of things as fast as possible through that building. And if I wanted to automate that historically, I would have needed millions and millions of dollars and months of planning and a lot of people and a lot of engineering and everything else. What I can do now is have this relatively blank slate building, bring in some autonomous robots. And so trucks come in, we're taking pallets and pallets and pallets of these vaccines out. We'll load them onto, let's say, a Vector Tugger. They're hauling, 8, 10 pallets at a time. We bring them into storage, drop them off, take them out to the outbound, take some pallets back out to the outbound dock, keep looping around. It's a great way to get more done with less resources in the facility. Like I said, historically, if somebody was going to do this and they needed the WMS integration, that is a painful operation for us. But through SoftBot platform, we don't have to worry about the integration anymore. And like TJ said, we can interact with other pieces of equipment. So whether that is the scenario that he mentioned, the Vector Tuggers arrive and we're able to send that trigger back to the WMS, and that gets a person to come and unload us as fast as possible so that the robot and the human are essentially meeting as soon as the tugger arrives. If we do need to change the workflows where we do turn off, we're only going to focus on shuttling product into the building or shuttling product out of the building as fast as possible. You can do that through the SoftBot platform, and then on the Pivotal front, our robots and everything else that's tied into our system will adapt to that, and so we'll know to prioritize getting these things done as fast as possible. And it allows you to spin up an automated facility in a matter of weeks, as opposed to needing basically an entire year to plan one of these out.
Okay, well, let's zoom out again a little bit. Let's zoom out to post-COVID world. We're all going to see these fascinating trends. So what are the broader challenges emerging for the manufacturing, warehouse, and distribution companies out there? TJ, do you want to take this one?
When we think about the future roadmaps, there's a couple of major drivers that we can all agree on. Labor is always going to remain a challenge. Matt mentioned, especially in pharma and places where maybe I've got freezer facilities and food and beverage, right? I don't know too many people that say, let me go work in -20. And so labor will remain a constant challenge in this industry of supply chain. 2, unknowns. The volumes continue to change, right? Are we e-com? Is it same-day delivery? There's great companies like GoPuff, Peapod, and others that, hey, I can deliver to the consumer in 15 minutes. Is that really required? Or is the requirement next day? 3 years from now, it may be everybody expects same-day delivery, right? Which will constantly change the fulfillment strategy. Micro-fulfillment will become even larger than it's growing today. And so I think these are the major challenges, is that how do I make sure that when I'm investing in technology that I'm not limiting my future and really enabling the fact that I can transfer equipment from facility to facility, or even, as Matt mentioned, across industries.
So let's, in order to wrap up the entire conversation, my question to you both is, when we're considering automation, or customers about to consider automation, do you ask them to crawl? Do you ask them to walk? Do you ask them to run in implementing automation? So perhaps TJ, you can take that first, and then Matt.
Yeah, certainly. So from our space with SVT Robotics and the SoftBot platform, it really comes down to the customer. Some customers have infrastructure, processes, et cetera, and they're ready to execute automation at a fast pace. It always comes down to change management inside the facility. And that's really key in our eyes, right? When you bring on a piece of automation, you do want to make sure that your operators are trained. Hey, what's the safety protocol of the equipment, right? It's key. I think Matt with Vecna will talk about the same, right? I mean, safety is paramount in all of our minds. But it's really about change management. Operationally, how do we flow with automation to make sure that we haven't boxed ourselves in and maybe sub-optimized some other processes, right? I mean, there's this constant trade-off of, hey, I need to get the pallet out the door. And so should the fork truck driver take it from storage and go directly to a trailer? Or should I drop it and allow a Vecna robot to now transfer it and eliminate that non-value added labor of the long haul transport, right? And there's a fine balance there. And so this is in configuration, et cetera. And so traditionally what we say is, look, we've eliminated a lot of the concerns that used to drive the crawl approach. The crawl approach was, hey, let me get 2 vehicles because I don't believe that the tech can actually work in my facility because it's constantly changing or it's dirty or people leave stretch wrap all over the place, right? And so with the SoftBot platform, this enables Vecna and others to really deploy large scale. But now that equipment can actually be leveraged across the network or other facilities, and as we change management, cleaning the building and things of this nature, we can revise flows. We can also redeploy the equipment elsewhere and these types of things. If you're considering automation, challenge us. I think between the SoftBot platform and technology providers like Vecna, we can come to the table with things that people haven't considered before for rapid deployment, flexibility, and really this enablement of resilient supply chain. So I'll let Matt kind of talk from his perspective. I think the quick deploy process, of course, supports rapidly bringing on automation, no matter if you want to pilot, et cetera.
And so the crawl approach at this point, the standards have been raised quite a bit to, okay, I want something that's going to provide ROI immediately. And then it gives time for the operation to adapt to new processes. Automated systems just behave differently than how people normally would. People are really good at dealing with what's right in front of them, and they're good at firefighting, and they're good at adapting on the fly. And automation is much more, it's going to be a lot more smooth and steady, you know that the robots are going to be able to handle a certain volume and whatnot, and they'll adapt to what you need them to do. But the marriage of those two, of people working alongside the robots and how that collaboration happens, that's still a process that people want to get used to. And so you can bring in solutions that are going to provide value. Let your staff get used to the robots, get used to their new coworkers, figure out how you want to change your processes, and then start to scale up from there, and knowing that you do have the hardware and software tools now through these combined solutions to still make those changes as time goes on.
So in a nutshell, you both provide resilient supply chain solutions that can be deployed in days. That's literally my takeaway from today's discussion. I just want to thank you both for your time and for also really describing how this all works. And so really grateful to you both, Matt, TJ, from the rest of your SVT Robotics and Vector Robotics teams for making this happen. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us, T. And I'll just leave it that challenge us. If anyone doesn't believe that you can deploy fast, flexible automation, contact either myself or Matt with Vector Robotics, and we're happy to discuss what the future of automation may look for like in your facility.